curated by VIBEZ Church to help you practice the way of Jesus and be all that God has called you to be. You have joined us for our year-long series titled Devoted. Acts 2:42 tells us that the followers of Jesus were devoted to the apostles' teaching, to fellowship, to breaking of bread, and to prayer. This podcast was created to provide context and commentary for what you read each day. Just before our friends begin discussing today's reading, we want to invite you not only for fellowship, but for prayer as well. We have created the VIBEZ Daily chat group to offer you fellowship and a community where you can state your observations, ask questions about the reading or the podcast. You can join us by downloading the VIBEZ Church app in your favorite app store. Click Join the Conversation and join us today. And finally, we hope that you can join us for prayer. Prayer happens Monday through Friday, and more information on that can be found on the VIBEZ Church app under prayer. Now, let's begin our conversation on today's reading.
All right, welcome back to the VIBEZ Daily podcast. It is day 79 of our devoted series. We have been in the Bible, reading it from cover to cover, started at Genesis. We are here in 1 Samuel this week and continue to pick up. I am excited to be back and joined by my wife, Victoria, my friend, Rob, as we continue through the book of 1 Samuel this week. So we left off at chapter 4 yesterday. Eli, who we were introduced to kind of in the first day or the first chapter of chapter 1, he and his sons have unfortunately met in untimely, well, maybe for Eli's kind of time, he was 98, but for his sons, not quite an early death, and a terrible death. And the Ark of the Covenant has been stolen. That is kind of where we left off in chapter 4. We pick up here in chapter 5, and the Ark is still in the Philistines' hands. They have not let it go yet. What do you guys feel is interesting here in chapter 5 as the Ark is in control of the Philistines?
The audacity
Ha!
to set it next to. So, and I had a question about this. I didn't know if this person was a real person or was it like an idol god?
An idol god.
Okay.
Yeah, Dagon.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes,
Dagon.
Dagon.
Mm-hmm.
The audacity to set it next to like a pagan god.
Yep.
And so I wonder, was that on purpose to show like I'm God, and to show, and then I also wonder like how many people in the Philistine camp were like actually like converted, like, or were they just like, you know, all terrified? But the audacity.
Yeah.
When you mean on purpose by who? Like, was it on purpose? Did the Philistines put it there on purpose, or are you asking if God like ordered himself to be placed there on purpose? What are you asking?
Did God like order himself on purpose to be like placed there to show the Philistines like, yo, I'm still God. Like, don't get it twisted because you were able to take like the physical representation of me from my people. I'm still God. And I wonder how many people like from the Philistine camp were like converted.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do feel like there was already this like fear of God in the Philistines, but you know, back then, I wonder if it was more so that it's like, yeah, you're a real God, but so is my other God, a real God too, right?
Yeah.
Like they just still served multiple gods. Like, well, I fear you, and I fear Dagon, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't know if it like they discredited who the other gods were. Sorry. But I do love, like you said, the audacity of them to sit God's ark next to Dagon. I feel like I felt like God was just like, no, you don't even get to stand in my presence. Like,
Right.
bow down to me. Like,
Yeah.
you're not even real. Like, you a false god, you demons, or whatever you are. Like, y'all gonna bow down to me in my presence because I reign over you and everything. And even to the point that, like, he does smash it up. Like does become smashed, and, you know, the limbs and stuff gets taken off and stuff. And so I do love that the Lord is like not tolerating it, you know?
Yeah. But isn't that, I think that's always been mankind's view of God.
Yeah.
Like,
Come on.
it's not so much that we don't believe in God. We just often don't believe he is like the God. Like, or that he is a greater God than whatever else we kind of put. Like even the Egyptians acknowledged the God of Joseph.
Yeah.
They just felt like he was again another god. Like he and Pharaoh are gods. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Right? Like the Greeks, or the Romans, I should say, in the New Testament, like they had their gods too, and they knew the God of the Jews. They just were like, yeah, there's that God, and we understand gods. We're fine with all of them, but they're just all equal in our minds,
Yeah.
right? And even like nowadays, I mean, I think that's the issues. Like, it's not so much that we don't believe in God. We just struggle to believe that he is the only God, right? Like we want all of it. Like we want what Yahweh offers us, and we want what Dagon offers us, right? Like we want what Balaam offers us, and Molech offers us, and Ashtaroth offers. Like we want all of it.
Yeah.
Whatever, we'll take them all.
That's like us now. We want money.
Yeah.
You
I want the Lord,
I want the
but
Lord.
I also want money, and I also want children, and I also want status,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, like all the other idols of today.
Yeah, I'll take whatever. I'll play whatever cards I can get. Give me the zodiac signs. Give me the whatever. Like give me them all. Like anything that'll help me get what I want out of this life, right? Because that's even the thing. Like the thing with what I believe the Philistines wanted is they wanted the favor of Yahweh.
They did.
Yeah.
They were like, "Yo, you out here conquering and dominating people every time you take this ark somewhere.
Yeah.
You take this
get
ark
it.
somewhere, and armies fall.
Yeah.
I want that."
Exactly.
They didn't want to pay the price for it though.
That and that's what it comes down to. Like for all of us, we want the salvation, the grace, the favor, right? We want the prosperity, the joy, the peace. We want all the stuff that God offers. That when we read the scripture, I'm just bringing it modern today. Now I'm bringing it back to today, right? Like we want all of what this offers us and it tells us, right? We want to be the head and not the tail. We want to be more than conquerors, right? We want to be all those things. But we don't want to do what it requires
Yeah. All those rules.
to get there.
Yeah.
Which means no other God before him.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Which means
Love the Lord.
love the Lord, which means die to myself daily, which means I'm a slave to Christ, which means I need to be transformed and renewed in my mind, right? It means I'm a living sacrifice. We don't want to do those pieces. I want the blessing.
I agree with you 1,012%. And I think
Very specific percentage.
yeah. Yeah. I think we as believers, we do a bad job of like telling you, we say salvation is free. In reality, it ain't.
Right.
We say like God bless the sinners as well as, you know, the saints. It's true, but I don't think we do a good enough job of telling you the after price. And we have complicated what it means to have a relationship, or what it means to really be in relate, or even just to be what it means to be a Christian, because there's like no clear line. Because like you said, I can have this and I can have this and I can still pray and God delivers. So it's like I can mess with Sage, I can mess with
Zodiacs.
Yeah, Zodiacs. And I can go and I can still pray to God, and God still brought me out of what, you know, I was in.
Yeah.
But in reality, bro, it's like, no, it this here, it tells you like, no, you got to die to yourself. And I think we as Christians have to do a better job of, one, being willing to be discipled, so that way whenever we encounter somebody, we can tell them clearly, like, no, it comes with a price.
Yeah.
You just can't get this for free. Or pick up the Bible and we're going to say this is our Ark of Covenant and expect like God to do what he's going to do. No, it don't work like that. It doesn't. I'm glad you said that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It requires all of us, like our whole selves. And
Yeah. It's what he's always asked of us.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and you know, this takes us back a few books now, but like this is Deuteronomy again, this is Joshua. Like, it's literally, it was a very simple message. I remember we were at the end of Deuteronomy, we were talking about this choose life piece, and like it was a very simple message. It was like, look, I only really require one thing, but I want to give you everything.
Yeah.
Like, I want to give you everything.
yeah.
The only thing I require of you is just worship me alone. Like,
Yeah.
just me. not yourself,
Yeah.
not these other gods, not your children, not like just worship me,
Yeah.
and I will give you everything
Yeah.
But it's so hard.
that you need, and yeah, it's I don't know, it is a challenge, but like I said, it's very much like us. So I get why the Philistines would put him in there, because they viewed him as just another god, and another god that they could get something from, right? We want the warrior god, the god that just conquered all these people. Let's take that, so that we can take advantage of it. But yeah, I mean, it's dope. He obviously establishes himself by making this god bow, by plaguing them with tumors, doing all sorts of things to just afflict and just really say like, I'm God, you guys don't deserve me. Here in the Philistines, you can't have me. To the point where they just like give it back like a bad kid. Like, y'all gotta take y'all child back.
Yeah.
Like, I can't deal with this no more.
I want to propose a thought. What if the Philistines would have actually submitted to God?
Right.
Just what if? Like, what if when they assemble, like, the leaders, what if they said, okay, let's submit to God?
Huh.
I wonder what would happen. Like, I wonder what would happen. Like, would God continue to, like, rain, like, these crazy tumors and, like, all this panic if they just would have submitted to him? I wonder, like, was he just upset because, like, yo, you got me. You got my attention. I'm here in your presence. What you gonna do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be. That would have been an interesting alternative, like hypothetical. I think the Philistines needed a lot more than just to choose to worship God, right? Like, God was so clear about what he required for like sanctification and consecration and like holiness, like what set their Israelites apart. The Philistines are extremely pagan people across the board, right? Like, part of why God told them to wipe the Philistines out in the first place, in addition to the Canaanites and Amorites and all the others that were in this land, is because they were this extremely pagan people, right? That had defiled the land that they were in. So I find it hard to believe God would have been like, all right, cool, come on back. You know, if they were like, yeah, we want to worship you. And maybe, you know, God is merciful. But I also know the Philistines were like, they were bad, you know? And we're essentially on the list of who God was like, y'all got to get rid of.
Yeah.
So.
And that's what I was thinking about too. Is like, at this point they should have been wiped out already.
Yeah.
Like, there should have been no more Philistines. If the Israelites went in and did what God had required of them with full of faith, like, they should have been gone at this point. But I feel like even in this instance is one of those things where the Lord is still continuing to show his wrath against the Philistines, because he probably knows just how stubborn of a people they are and how far off they are from him. And so he afflicts them. So it's like the hand of God was heavy there. This is verse 11. I'm sorry. Let me back up. Verse 11 says, for there was a deathly panic, throughout the whole city. The hand of God was very heavy there. The men who did not die were struck with tumors, and the cry of the city went up to heaven. And so to me, it was like even him was doing probably what the Israelites were supposed to go in and do too, was even just like wiping out some of them and taking out some of them. And so, yeah, I think he probably years ago gave them a chance, or probably sent them a prophet or something, just knowing who our God is. But like you said, they're still kind of on their gods.
I appreciate that, like, explanation, because oftentimes, like, when I read, like, I'm always thinking of like, oh, that would have, because I feel like God like gives that just enough space for you to ask him like questions, like, God, I wonder what if. And I guess to like if you wouldn't have known like how pagan the Philistines were, then it may have like kind of went over your head. So I would definitely appreciate that explanation.
Yeah. Well, in chapter 6, they give it back.
Take your stuff.
Take it back.
With the quickness.
Yeah. What kind of jumped out to you guys here in chapter 6? Because then we're going to get to a couple a couple interesting chapters with war, and then ultimately how Israel gets a king is kind of what we'll finish today. But anything that was particularly interesting in chapter 6 for you guys?
Just for them like seeking advice on how to return. And so I had a question, like, what is like omen readers like were there like some type of like, that's my first time like ever like
You said
seeing
omen what?
omen readers.
Yeah, what your version
in
says?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In verse 2, it said the Philistine called the priest and the omen reader, saying, What should we do with the ark of the Lord? Advise us as to how we should send it back to its place. So I would just wonder, like, I know what priest is, I just don't know what like omen readers are. What do y'all versions say?
Mine says the diviners.
Diviners, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what mine has. So those are divination, right? Those that are using almost like witchcraft and spirits, like that summon spirits for like, or evil spirits for things. So that's kind of essentially what these people were. So these were other individuals who were leaning into, they would often intercede with evil spirits to get information, or I mean, you see that often, like it was like that in Egypt and other places.
Balaam.
Like Balaam.
Okay.
Balaam used omens.
Balaam, yep. When like they would do that to often, again, try to get access to, you know, prophecy or things of that nature. And as we saw with Balaam, I mean, it worked. Like, it's one of those things that's so challenging about our faith, is that like even those who are seeking wisdom from places other than God, that they can sometimes still get access to truth, right? But like, it's about knowing, one, where that truth comes from, and again, the source and the purpose of it. But yeah, that's kind of what a diviner or an omen reader was.
So would it be a stretch to say that like this is where it shows that like even like demons or the devil know the word of God, or know like who God is?
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Okay.
Yep.
Because it tripped me out like in verse 3 when it said they replied.
Yeah.
So they had, once again, the audacity.
Yeah.
They replied, if you're going to send the ark of God of Israel back, don't send it away empty. So at some point in time, like these spirits may work in the presence of a God, and they know like some of the characteristics of God. Like that was like eye opener for me, that even like evil knows who God is and have respect for him.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because they know what's up.
Yeah.
They know who they dealing with. Like, this is the guy who created all of us. There ain't no doubt about it.
Yeah, but I mean, that's a good point. They ultimately are able to give that clear instruction. And that instruction was simple. Take an offering, with it, send one. They literally create tumors, which is weird in my opinion, but they make those images. They kind of sit it back, and the ark is returned to the people of Israel. So it takes us right into chapter 7, where there is like 20 years or so has gone by, right? Is how chapter 7 kind of leads us off. And there is a victory here, a battle that takes place in chapter 7. What did you guys find was interesting here? And this war really against the gods, again, it feels like, with Baal and Asherah and some others involved.
Like, go ahead.
You go.
No.
Okay, yeah. In this verse 3, I just love how Samuel just starts it off though, like because you just mentioned like their hearts probably weren't close to God, right?
Yeah.
And they probably had all these foreign gods with them, which is why in verse 3, Samuel was just like, okay, first of all, like, let's get something straight before we start going out to battle and calling on the Lord.
Yeah.
Like, let's address this issue at hand.
Yeah.
I need you to return to the Lord with all your heart, put away the foreign gods and Ashtaroth among you, and direct your heart to the Lord and serve him only, and he will deliver you out of the hands of the Philistines. And so once again, it's like it's not about the Ark of Covenant that you over here trying to, pass around. No, he wants your heart. get rid of the foreign gods, and then he will show up on your behalf.
Yeah, you took. You definitely.
I took it.
Yeah, you
I took yours.
Yeah, you took it.
Oh,
You took it.
I'm
all the
sorry.
way. No. It's good. It's good. Because it's like, man, like, I wonder how much work that required. Like, think about it today. Like, if we were to do that, like, our house probably would be empty. Like, TV, the bed, you name it, it gotta go. But me personally, I just don't want to ever get to that point to where, like, I gotta have someone else pray on my behalf, so for God to move in my life. Like, and it said, I think where you left off, verse 4.
Yeah.
Let me find it again. Where it's like, where I think, what a paraphrase it says, where he was like, I will pray on your behalf.
Yeah.
So was Samuel the only person that was like living something? Like,
Yeah.
that's scary. Like, the only way you can get in touch with, like, the person that created you, the person that, like, giving you life, if someone else pray on your behalf.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, and that was obviously somewhat common in that time, right? As we kind of got in the beginning of chapter 3 again, that the word of the Lord was just kind of rare, and he didn't necessarily speak to everybody like that. But yeah, I think, it was interesting to me that, like, I juxtapose this when I go back to Judges. It was an interesting thing that Venice brought up on our podcast last week, that, like, the further we got into Judges, the first few Judges, there was, like, peace after the judge, like, rose up and, like, conquered and won a war. There was, like, peace in the land for, like, 20 years or 40 years. After, like, the first 4 or so judges, they just ruled and there was never peace. Like, we never heard about peace again. But I thought it was interesting to hear at the end of 7 that, like, they had peace. In 14, it was like the cities from Ekron to Gath, which had been taken from Israel, was restored. Israel even rescued their surrounding territories from Philistine control. There was also peace between Israel and the Amorites. And then, like, there's this, and then Samuel's out here just making rounds to the different cities, just being a judge and a priest, all these different areas. But, like, I don't know. I thought it was interesting because you kind of finally see the rise of a judge in Israel who, like, truly serves the Lord.
Yeah.
Right.
Whereas a lot of the judges that rose in the actual book of Judges were literally just warriors that God rose up just to win a particular battle.
Like
right?
Samson
was a mess.
Wild.
Like, an absolute mess. Gideon had his faults. I mean, a lot of these judges that were brought up were doing all sorts of stuff, building their own altars in their home, building idols. Like, I think it was Gideon that had, like, built some, or maybe it was Gibeon that had built, like, some shrine with gold earrings to himself, and he starts to feel himself a little bit. Like, all these judges were, like, about themselves in a lot of ways. And we start to see, okay, what happens when there's a judge who is literally serving the Lord, and that's his only, like, effort and intention, that now all of a sudden there's actual peace in Israel. And I was like, this is crazy. And I mean, there's other wars we'll get to here later, but, like, just the fact that there is some sort of, like, that word peace wasn't even mentioned in Judges for, like, the last 3/4 of the book. And so it just jumped out to me to see that this time.
Yeah.
It's interesting. That's a good point. I never thought about that. Never really thought to compare that to the judges.
Yeah.
So I wonder, did Samuel, like, fight? Now that you, like, bring that point up, like, or was he just, like, always just consecration, like, or just spending time with God? Because they never really say that.
Later on, he's chop suey somebody now.
Like, that's a good point, man. Because, like, so it makes me wonder, like, was that their purpose, just to, like, win the war, and that's it, and someone else is supposed to lead the people?
Yeah. I don't know. I don't think so much for the judges in, again, the book of Judges.
Right.
I don't think the judges were necessarily warriors. That wasn't always the case. Even Deborah, for instance, I mean, she wasn't a warrior. She was a prophetess, right? And even the war or battle that she won, she didn't actually do anything.
Yeah.
Like somebody, Barack is who goes into battle, and then there's another woman that actually kills the king, right? So, yeah, I don't think a judge necessarily had to be a warrior, but I do think, yeah, oftentimes some of them did actually go and fight, and others, yeah, well, others didn't. I mean, to me, I'm like, in this case, his weapon was just this burnt offering, right?
Yeah.
Like, this burnt
Yeah.
offering he offered was his weapon, and that was all he needed to do. And the Lord was getting
And
to
the
go.
Lord did the rest.
Yeah, the Lord had
Right.
handled his business.
And now we see this pattern again, like going into 8, to where Samuel was just, and as he get old, you know, he starts to kind of delegate some power, and his sons are unjust.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I joke, and if my uncle watches, he gonna kill me, but oh well. I joke and say, like, I think, like, sometimes the pressure of like being up under someone that spends so much time with God, like, it may sometimes make you not want nothing to do with him. Yeah. And so it's like, now, because you are my son, like, you're my birthright, like, it's expected of you to walk the same path as me.
Yeah.
In reality, it's like, yo, I don't want nothing to do with it. Yeah. And I wonder why. Like, I wonder, why is it like that? Like, why is it like Samuel, like, was like the example, and his son saw that he was the example, and if they probably would have walked like with him, they probably would have had like the example once again. But instead, they like, yo, Dad got it. I just can just walk off like Dad's grace with God. Like, I wonder, like, why is that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think we see it time and time in Scripture. Our relationship is our own. We can't command or demand, of those behind us. And again, even if we are, when it comes to our own life, we are not necessarily held to whatever came before us. Like, we get our own choice. It's why, at the end of Joshua, Joshua says, like, look, you get a choice today. You can worship the gods of your fathers, or you can choose today to worship the Lord. But it's up to you. Actually, me and my house, like, we gonna worship the Lord, but like, you get a choice. Yes, I know Abraham came from a pagan land. I get that. I know you was in Egypt, or your people was in Egypt, and they worship some other stuff. I know these people. I get it. I know where they came from, but you get a choice. And I think that's for all of us. We all get that option, one way or the other, and we have to choose for ourselves.
Yeah. And I think even your question is something that I've asked the Lord so many times, and just having kids, right? It's like, well, Lord, if Moses, can keep his household together, and Samuel can keep his household, and Eli can keep his sons together, like, how are we supposed to raise up our children in the way that follow you? Yeah. And it's just like, I guess it is like we do the best that we can, and they have to make a choice on their own. But like, I'm like, Lord, there's something, like, show me what might have been missing there, or what, like, were they too caught up in ministry and not at home? Did they not bring the kids with them? I don't know. I was just like, I wonder what happened, because we do see this so many times, and it's been a question of mine too.
Like, as a kid that like grew up in church, like, for me, I think it kind of went back to like what you said, Eric. Like, at the end of the day, like, you have to make a choice. But for me, at least, I can't speak for none of my other siblings. It was easy for me to make that choice, because like, I saw the benefits that it did for my parents, like my grandparents that actually, like, lived it before me. So when it came time for my choice and I like explored, it was a no-brainer. Yeah. And the choice wasn't like forced upon me. Like, yeah, they told me like what was spoken over me as a child, like, yeah, all this other stuff. But I think like, whenever you give someone that choice and there's no pressure to it, they're like more receptive to receive like what comes with it. And I think when it comes to like kids, like kids are observant, like so they see like like the benefits, but sometimes like the pressure of like fulfilling someone that have really walked with God, like that pressure, it makes you not want it.
Yeah.
Like, cause it's like, I seen my parents walk with God, but it was po. I don't want to be po, so I gotta go do this not to be po.
Yeah.
And if you're not careful, you'll just get caught up in it. And I think that's like what happens like with like just kids. Like we see the consequences like of our parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles hurting, like serving God, and it's like, I don't want nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
But I do want the blessings, like you kind of made that point before. I do want the blessings. I do want to be the head and not the tail. I do want to be everything else.
Yeah,
But I just don't want to pay that price.
There's suffering that comes with following the Lord. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting about like all of that, like you said, despite kind of their desire to not follow, right, and to not live up to that same standard of what Samuel did, I really thought it was interesting that like the people's response to that was like, give us a king, right? Like it, to me, it almost disregards that the last time there was a priest or a judge whose sons strayed from the Lord, God replaced that person, right, with Samuel. Like God had a plan for it. But yet this time it feels like the Israelites felt like they needed to take it into their own hands and come up with a solution. And their solution was, we need a king, right? And which is why I think that's why God says like they didn't reject you, like they've rejected me as their king. Like it's not about you, Samuel, like because I had a plan and I always have a plan, right? But they have come to determine that my plan's probably not good enough, right? And that they need a king instead, like the other lands. But yeah, was there anything here in chapter 8, aside from, I know it's kind of like transitioning to the beginning of 8, anything else that just jumped out to you guys in chapter 8 before we bring our conversation to a conclusion today?
I think God reminded Samuel that like don't like get offensive or don't take offense to like the people's like wanted to take it in their own hands, like they did this before, and him recalling when they did it, like I guess gave it. I guess that was God's way of like giving Samuel like comfort, like this is nothing that you did, like you have been a great follower of me. This is just the people.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the people that I've allowed you to lead, like they want a quick, fast, and simple solution, and I'm not that type of person. Yeah. And it's okay. Don't be disheartened. Like, I'm pleased with you. I guess that was his way of like saying, I'm pleased with you.
Right.
I think sometimes like serving God and leading people, and you've done like all you can do, and then for people to still gripe and complain about how you've led them can be disheartening and can cause you to like backslide. Like, look at Moses.
Yeah.
Like,
Or I don't want to do this anymore.
I don't want to do this anymore. And it causes you to miss the promise that God has for you. And I think maybe God didn't want Samuel to miss the promise that he had for him. So he's like, stay cool, stay calm, stay collective. This ain't got nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
But I am going to reward you.
And I love that the Lord even reminded Samuel of who these people are.
Yeah.
He's like, they've always been like this. From Egypt on, they have always been forsaking me, serving other gods, and now they're just doing the same thing to you, right? By you still being alive and them still proclaiming that they want a king instead. And so, but I do think it was really interesting that down in verse 20 that they said, we want to be like all the nations. Yeah. And it's like, that's the one thing the Lord told them to go into this promised land and not do. He said, don't be like the other nations. I have set you apart, and that I will be your king. Yeah. And I will make you blessed. And so instead, here they are. They've taken their gods. They've taken other people to be their wives and children, born children with them. Yeah. Now they want their customs. And it's so interesting. He says that they want a king to go out before them and fight their battles. And I'm like, well, who just rained down thunder in the previous chapter? Like the previous chapter, chapter 7, verse 10 is like the Lord thundered and caused to have a great confusion.
Yeah.
Right.
Like the Lord continues to just do stuff where like they don't even have to fight sometimes. Or, like
Yeah.
the enemy just fights against themselves and they just show up and get all the plunder. Like
Right.
who else do you
Yeah.
want to show up before you in battle for?
Yeah.
But you want a
Yeah.
person to lead you up, which makes no sense to me.
That we
I mean,
sometimes.
it's exactly what we do.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what we do.
Like I want that tangible king. I want that king I can reach, that I can
Yup.
touch,
I
that's
can see.
here, that I can see, right? That I can give credit to, that I can worship. Because, yeah, like it's, I don't know, like it you said, he's been literally doing exactly what they're asking this king to do.
Yep.
It's been done. It's been done for them. Every time they cry out, they conquer, they cry out, they get conquered because they sinned, and they cry out and they repent, conquered. Battle.
Yeah.
Battle's won because of the Lord. Like you said, like they're not even doing stuff. Hail falling from the sky,
Right.
running around in confusion, killing each other instead. Like all sorts of stuff be happening. It has nothing to do with the Israelites. They just show up like, oh man, everybody dead.
Yeah.
Like we won. You know?
Taking it for granted.
Yeah. Made no sense.
And then lastly, that for me at least, I gotta commend Samuel like on how good of a listener he was. Like even though he knew like this was not God's plan, like he still listened to go to God on their behalf.
Yeah.
And I think that takes like a strong leader to know what God has said and still listen to the foolishness and go to God on your behalf and then articulate what God has said to you.
Yeah.
I think that takes like a different level of like discipline. Because I know me, I'm boneheaded. Like if somebody tell me something and you tell me something different, I ain't trying to hear what you got to say. Like, yo, it's this way or you can get lost. But for Samuel to have the ability to listen and then go to God on their behalf and he know that this ain't for like what God has called, and to be able to petition to God what the people want. That's next level leadership. Like to listen to confusion and articulate it with grace to God. That's some next level leadership.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll conclude with this, and I know we gotta wrap this conversation, but I will just say there's a comfort that just I feel like the Lord just gave me right now in this moment. Well, in verse 7. So what I just read, that they have not rejected you, but they have rejected me as their king. That like I appreciate the grief that Samuel probably feels. Devoting his life and energy and effort to leading a people to God, right? To wanting them to just love God and serve God and to understand him and know him for who he is. And watch people just reject God.
Yeah.
And like take it personal first. Like, Lord, what did I do?
But they're not doing enough.
Like he said he knew it was wrong. He considered the other man wrong. He knew. That's why he goes to pray to God, because he's like, I know this is not right.
Yeah.
And God, I feel like God just frees him, and it's just this, to me, this comfort and this care that God shows Samuel to just free him from that responsibility and that ownership to say like, this is not your fault, Samuel.
Yeah.
You have served me well. Right? It's what you said. Like you served me well. You've done your part. Like they rejected me. This is who they are. Don't take it personal. Go and warn them. Tell them the truth about what they're doing. Then let it go. And let them make the choice that they're going to make. And like, again, man, like I feel like this is the Lord talking to me right now in some ways.
In the moment.
But yeah, just like I think as a leader, particularly a leader in the church and in spiritual lives, when you pour into people and you teach, and you pastor, and you mentor, and you coach, and you do whatever else, sometimes you have to just watch people just make mistakes, choose something else. And I just appreciate the freedom of just like, they didn't reject you. They rejected me. Like, let it go, son. Let it go. Like, that's how I read this. As the Lord says that to Samuel.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's good.
That's the way to end.
Yeah.
That's a high note.
But thank you guys for sitting on my therapy couch with me there in that moment. But yeah, appreciate you guys joining us for today's conversation. We have 4 more chapters tomorrow. We'll pick back up on chapter 9, see what happens next. They want a king. Do they get one? Come back and join us tomorrow to see, right? To be continued. But until then, you guys take care. See you tomorrow.
Thank you for joining us for the VIBEZ Daily Podcast. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform or download our favorite, the VIBEZ Church app. Visit vibes.church/devoted for additional episodes, notes, details, and the latest merch. Join us next time as we continue our journey through the Bible.